let's talk about playing faster, because that's something that you wanted to look into. Playing more aggressive and playing faster. Do you think those are the same? Do you think they're like
No.
Okay.
No.
So, do you think there's a world in which JDC plays faster but still plays defensively?
Yes, and that's where I eventually want to be. I feel
Right.
like when I envision myself, that's sort of I feel like I don't really I feel like I'm not an aggressive player in any game by nature. Like every esport that I've ever like competed in, I've always been the more like reserved type of player. But I feel like I feel like I spend too much time I spend too much time worrying about what I'm doing, and I feel like it really holds me back.
Hmm.
Cause I mean, I played Rocket League very competitively for many years, and I was very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like, and like I got good at like the very quick decision making. But I feel like Smash is even faster. But there's also like
More
so many
information.
characters. Yeah. So it feels very interesting. Like,
did you tune in yesterday? Did you?
No, cause I was busy.
Yeah, I'm busy whenever I stream as well. I understand.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. So yesterday we talked about this. It's very interesting. It's called an OODA Loop. It's yeah. What is that? That sounds weird. It's a system used in the U.S. military. How I know that? Don't ask me. And it's basically a system for decision making. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. It's basically the 4 steps that you go through when you make a decision. So the idea of observing is basically reacting to the situation, right? So like I'm in this situation now. Orientation is basically comfort with your own options. So in other words, it's like you're orienting like these are the options I could use. Which one is the best one, right? Decide is your psychological comfort, right? Like how quickly are you deciding? And what you find is that usually the more comfortable you are, the faster you decide, which is like, for example, flow. I'm sure you're familiar with flow state. Flow state is basically like when you make decisions very quickly. In other words, you're very psychologically comfortable. And then acting is your execution, right? So what I've noticed is that a lot of these you don't really control very well. Your reaction to the situation, this is all like experience, right? Your psychological comfort is all experience. Your execution is, well, that's, like that's stuff that you can grind out. You can grind out your execution and become, mailman at home. But this orientation, this is where you can strategize, right? Because the more you optimize how you categorize your information, the more you optimize how you structure your information, the faster you can orient on your options. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I feel like in your situation especially, it sounds like you struggle to orient properly. Where it's like, okay, well, there's so many options.
No,
which one should I pick?
I get like dizzy almost.
So what I think would be worth doing is I think it's worth it to try to play faster and defensively and spend a lot of time analyzing your replays and basically just trial and error your way through to fast decision making. So a lot of it is obviously like, like I said, you're strategizing your systems, your concepts, et cetera. But it's also about just doing it, right? So for example, let's say we try to play faster against BD Bean, and we play faster and we realize, well, we're playing a lot worse because in this situation, I picked this option where I should be picking this option, blah, blah, blah. That is actually like the best practice you can get. I think it's way better to try to play fast and then just spend a lot of time reviewing your replays, your situations, your decisions, and then kind of like try to figure out while you have time what the good option would be, than to try to like slowly play faster and faster and faster, and kind of like ramp it up. Because if you, again, it's like trial by fire, right? Like if you play faster and you do so poorly, let's say that's like 100 mistakes you're making. That's 100 points of data of improvement, right? And you're also going to probably find a lot of patterns in your play as well. Whereas if you slowly go faster, it can be hard to find consistent mistakes because you're just playing a little bit faster. That means that in a lot of cases, it's like, okay, well, am I just too slow here? Blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you're just like, I'm just going to play fast, you'll probably find a lot more mistakes. So what I recommend is to just like use this system as a way to reflect on, like use the system to reflect on where your mistakes or your fast play mistakes go wrong. Because here's the deal, right? Like at the end of the day, faster is better. And essentially, and this is my current opinion of playing faster. It is subject to change because it's something that I'm thinking about a lot still. But essentially, it's a game of chicken. Where you can say, let's say your fastest play is 100 decisions per minute, right? So like, let's say 100 BPM, right? Because every beat is like a decision. That means that in tournament, will you try to play at 100 BPM? Well, probably not, right? You'll probably play it safe and go for, let's say, 90 BPM. But now imagine we play versus MK Leo and he plays at 95 BPM. Well, we probably want to try to push to match that tempo. So in other words, you try to increase without going over your limit, because you know, like your decisions stop being accurate after about 100 decisions per minute. So you play this game of chicken where it's like, how can I get as close? Like, how close to the sun can you fly without getting burned? And some players don't force you to do so, but some players do, right? Like it's the same in every meta. I feel like the Japanese players generally play at a lower rate of decision making, but their decisions are very consistent and their decision speed is very consistent. Whereas if you look at American players, there's a lot more of a mix between playing fast and slow or too fast at times as well, which you can see with, for example, Steve players. A lot of Steve players lose because they're playing too fast. They're flying too close to the sun. And part of that is also because, well, like if you can make 100 good decisions per minute in practice, how does that play out on tournament, right? What is your tournament decision-making speed? So it is about basically like it's optimization, and there's no like interactive systems. There's nothing fun about it. All of this is faster is better. And you're like the only bit of like human element in it is like when you're under pressure, how close to the sun are you willing to fly? It's important though. It is very important. And I do want to stress, right? Like playing faster does not mean playing more aggressively. It's just making your decisions more quickly. And a lot of that can be, I'll finish this point and then we can discuss, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that in my experience is also like, how comfortable are you deciding, right? So, the observation part, this is mostly like experience, right? So what you notice is like top level players, they often win versus lower level players because they observe more quickly, but it can also be simplicity, right? So like Byleth is a relatively straightforward character. I'm sorry if you disagree.
No, I agree.
And that also makes observation a little bit easier because the situation is less complex to react to. So that's a good thing, right? Whereas characters like Young Link or Peach might struggle a little bit more with reacting to situations properly. The orientation phase, this is often like, this is where there's a most to gain. And a decision phase as well. This is more like, let's say this is your planning limitations and this is your tournament limitations. And then I would say acting is basically your grinding limitations, and then observing is your experience limitations. So if you are a strategy gamer, I hate that word gamer. It's been
I
destroyed.
Get it,
if you're a strategy gamer, then you want to be as good as possible at your orientation. So for you, it's like, if you're not optimizing your orientation, you're not playing to your own strengths. That's why your decisions are slow. It's because you haven't optimized your strategizing. And what you find is that all of these are pitfalls in and of themselves. So let's say I know players who are very comfortable under pressure. So what you find, or what you'd think, is that they're very quick at deciding, right? Which is good. But that is also a pitfall because sometimes they decide too quickly and they didn't orient correctly, right? So like leaning too much into it can also be bad. So for you, leaning too much into strategizing just makes your orientation slower. Leaning too much into deciding makes your process worse because you're deciding too quickly. Leaning too much into acting shifts the focus from the mental aspect to the physical aspect, which is not very conducive to winning. Leaning too much into observation can get you stuck in analysis paralysis because you're just constantly reacting to a new situation instead of actually acting on a situation. So it's not like any of these is worse than the other, but it is important to not have too much hubris within these individual elements, which in your case, I'm not saying you do, but when you do focus so much on strategizing, well, that does have its limitations, just like every one of these does. Okay.
Yeah, I've experienced each one of those like pitfalls
Oh
that you
yeah.
described. I think I feel like especially recently because I've been working on execution and that's definitely changed my focus, but also I feel like my biggest limitations are definitely both the tournament limitations, but also like the fact that I get too far into the strategy. And I think what we talked about earlier definitely helps a lot with the fact that I was definitely filtering all the information in a very like inefficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'll definitely help me out. But
Yeah. And so I think this idea of like decisions per minute, BPM, DPM, whatever you want to call it, I think that's very powerful because it forces you to not get stuck on any of these, right? Like if you're trying to reach a tempo of like 90 BPM, you cannot get stuck strategizing. So that's something that I really recommend focusing on when you're practicing on this. It's not about like, I don't want you to go in there and just make like decisions as quickly as possible because you're kind of like, you're not properly going through your
I get it.
OODA loop.
It's like playing like blitz chess.
Exactly. It's exactly that. It's like playing music as well, right? Like you don't rush through a piece.
I am a musician, yes.
Oh, there you go. So this is a very good comparison. It's like, why do you play music? It's not to get to the end of it, right? It's for the sake of the play itself.
Yeah.
And Smash is the same. So when you start focusing on getting to the end of a game, you're not actually playing the game. And it's the same for music. When you're focusing on getting to the end, you're not actually playing the music. So focus on playing the music instead of trying to get to the end, and then you'll be golden.
This is true.
So true. I love that analogy. It's being in the present.
It's funny. Yeah. Well, it's funny because I'm also a jazz musician.
Oh,
so
look at you.
When it comes to like the improv, I guess I just need to let it ride. It's so hard. I feel like to believe